If there was one habit I would attribute the bulk of my personal growth in the last few years to, it would be consistently doing daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly reviews. By the end of this video, you will learn not only why you should do reviews, but how to do them seamlessly with the Obsidian periodic notes plugin. Let's get into it. First off, why should we even be doing reviews? Well, writing is in itself a form of thinking. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've started writing in a journal to think through a problem or something that I'm fearful about. And that very act of writing in itself helps me uncover what it was that I was scared about in the first place, or what to do next. The next is it helps expose emotions and thoughts. When you write down things in a journal, whether it be morning pages or whatever type of journaling you're doing, over time, you can uncover the ways that certain things make you feel or the thoughts that you have about something. And that can be really helpful to notice as you journal more and more. Third, it's fun to look back upon and see how far you've come. I think it's really easy for us as human beings to get kind of stuck on the hedonic treadmill, as it's called in psychology, which is the phenomenon that we humans are notoriously good at getting used to positive or negative changes in our life, which makes it hard to feel good about things that we've had for a while. So by journaling, you have a method of looking back and reflecting on how far you've come and kind of getting past that hedonic treadmill in a bit. The fourth is that you get to see your life as a story by seeing days, weeks, months, years as part of a greater whole. On the daily, it's very hard to see that story-like nature. But when you see it in a much larger sense, you can see the trends in your life. Like, oh, this is the period where I was really into teaching, or this is the period where I got super into trying to score as much points on Flappy Bird, things like that. And then fifth and finally, this is probably the most important, is you can do lifestyle design, which is the art of designing the perfect lifestyle for you. As you journal more and more, you can see how activities make you feel, why they make you feel that way, and what underlying values make those activities feel that way. What this allows you to do is you can purposely put things in your calendar or in your task list that you know from past weekly, monthly, daily, or yearly reviews make you feel amazing. And that is powerful. So let's talk about how to do that with the periodic notes plugin. So in order to install it, it's just like any other community plugin. You're going to open up your settings, go to the community plugins right here, go to the search browse, and then you're going to search up periodic notes. I have already installed it, so there is no install for me, but you're just going to click the install button and you're going to go to the options right here. Now this is going to show you a screen with daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly notes. It's worth mentioning that if you use the periodic notes plugin, the daily notes plugin is essentially obsolete. The daily notes plugin comes in with core Obsidian plugin, so you can go ahead and just uninstall or just deactivate the daily notes plugin. Then what you're going to do is we are going to set up the template notes and the note folders where we want our daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly notes to go. And we're also going to put in the format for how we would like them to come. Now, personally, I like having the day, the month, and then the year. I know that is really weird for most people, but I personally just like seeing the day first because the day is the most important part to me. All right, so once you have filled out this format for all of the notes that you'd like to do, the next thing you're gonna do is create a template folder for each of them. Now, personally, I store all my templates in a folder in my database called templates. And then in my daily notes right here, I have a daily review template. So what you're going to do is for each of the reviews that you would like to do, you're just going to type in a daily review, for instance, and you're going to go there, and it's filled out right now because I actually have a template template in there, but you're gonna create your own template, or you can take my templates and use them from the description for totally for free. Then after you have created that template note, go back into the periodic notes plugin and you will put that template as the template that is used for the note. And you're gonna do that for the daily note, for the weekly note, for the monthly note, and for the yearly note. Then you're also gonna want a folder for those notes. This is essentially where those notes that are periodically made every single day for the daily notes or week for the weekly notes and so on. They don't have anywhere to go if you don't put them in a folder. So personally, the folder I like to use is a specific calendar folder in my database that holds all of my reviews, which is split in terms of if they're daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. And you can see that here. All the daily notes go to the calendar with the reviews in the review folder and specifically in the daily folder for the reviews. And if I go over to my folder system over here, you can see I have my calendar, then the reviews, and then all of my daily notes. There's a lot of them. All of my monthly notes. I haven't done that many yet. And all of my weekly notes and all my yearly notes, which I have not done a yearly review inside of Obsidian yet, but I did do a lot of them in Roam Research and Notion when I use those. So let's go through each of my templates and just explain what each of them means. So this is my daily review template. This is what I see when I open up Obsidian every single day in the morning. It has a question, which is what significant things happened today. And that's where I like to put in any things that I really don't want to forget when I look back at them during the weekly review and monthly review. Things like, oh, really nice conversations I had with friends, or really fun activities I did, or a really interesting moment that I want to highlight. Any good accomplishments that I made today. That's where things there go. Then this is one of my favorite questions. What was the most story-worthy moment of the day? This is where I go back through and think on my day and I ask, if I were to tell a 5-minute story from my day, what would it be on? And write that down. It doesn't have to be that long. It can be literally 2 words. It can be 1 sentence. It could be a whole paragraph. This is a concept that I took from the book Storyworthy by Matthew Dix, and I am loving it because what it allows me to do is find those most storyworthy moments every single day. In my weekly review, I asked what the most storyworthy moment of the week was, and that lets me get a really nice jumping point for what are the best stories I can tell friends when I see them or write about in my articles. And I have the best thing I learned, pretty self-explanatory. What is the biggest thing I'm grateful for? And these 2 things I actually write right in the morning when I get up. The reason I write about what is the biggest thing I'm grateful for, as I said earlier, hedonic treadmill, we're very good at not appreciating positive changes in our life, things we've had for a while. It's a good way to appreciate them. And then what is my daily highlight? This is another productivity hack. A daily highlight is essentially if you didn't get anything else except this one thing you put in the daily highlight done at the end of the day, you would still be satisfied because you got that one thing done. Guess what my daily highlight for today is? Recording this YouTube video. So I pat myself on the back. I'm doing a good job right now. And then finally, last thing for daily review is any pending thoughts or concerns. Pretty much just I can write anything I want there, any thoughts, any concerns, and it's interesting to see as I reflect back upon it during the weekly reviews. So my weekly review template is a whole bunch of code. I promise it's not nearly as complicated as it looks. I'll show you how I actually put these templates into action later by showing example daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly reviews. But what this essentially code does is when I go into my weekly review on a certain day, it can automatically fill out the weekly review note with all of this information, and it automatically puts in all of the last 7 days as well as the last week, the next week, and then this week. And the reason I like that so much is if I go into an example weekly review quick before I show this template, I can very, very quickly skip around to different weekly reviews by clicking on these tabs. And I can also go to specific days very easily by clicking on those tabs. So I really, really like that ability. Now, if we go back to the weekly review template, my weekly reviews, I asked the question, what was the most story-worthy moment of the week? I looked through all 7 of the story-worthy moments from the daily reviews and I picked my favorite. And like I said, that gives a really good basis for what I should be talking about to friends and in my articles. Then we have what was the most enjoyable event of the week. This is where I go through all the significant things that I wrote about in the daily review. What was the most significant things you do? And I ask, what was the most enjoyable event? And it's really fun to see the recurrences in the weekly review, like what ends up being the thing I enjoy most. What were the 3 big wins for the week? What were the 3 most enjoyable events of the week? What was the most valuable thing I learned this week? And then finally, what did I like and not like about my life roles for the week? So my life roles are 3 things that I've essentially ascribed as the most important roles that I act out in my life. And those are health, relationships, and teaching, ordered by how important I think they are. So my health is number 1. I include mental health and physical health in that. So I try my very best to be as healthy as possible. And in my relationships, that counts like family interaction, social interaction with friends, relationships with coworkers, things like that. And then teaching, I count as like schoolwork, teaching on this YouTube channel, teaching on my blog, my podcast, things like that. Any form of teaching whatsoever. And the reason that I like doing this last section is I go through my calendar and all the days from last week, and it allows me to very concretely see if I ascribed to these 3 roles as I would have liked. Because on the daily, it's very easy to not see if you're messing up on these roles that you deem are important. But when you look at it at a much larger frame, you can totally see the cracks. So let's go to the monthly review now. Very similar to the weekly review, I have some code that allows me to jump really easily back and forth between the monthly reviews, and it also shows the last 4 weeks. So I asked myself, what was the most enjoyable event of the month? What was the biggest win of the month? What did I like and not like about my life roles for the month? And then this is the unique part to the monthly review. What are the key projects for next month? What is my number 1 priority at work this month? And what is my number 1 priority in my personal life this month? I think these are really powerful because a lot of people in the productivity sphere, farther you get, you realize doing less is actually doing more. And by defining what your number 1 priorities for both work and personal life are, it's much, much more likely that you will definitely get those done, even aside from all the other projects you're doing. So this is my yearly review, and I have not done one yet in Obsidian, but I definitely will be soon because the year is almost over. Very similar to the monthly and weekly. It lets me jump back and forth very easily, and it also has all of the months shown, the last 12 months of the year. Then my questions are, what was the most enjoyable event of the year? What were the 6 biggest wins of the year? What were the 3 most valuable things I learned this year? What 20% of things accounted for 80% of my enjoyment? This is a really interesting question. It goes by the Pareto principle, which states that 20% of the inputs account for 80% of the outputs. So applied to your life, it means that 20% of the things in your day probably account for 80% of your enjoyment. And 20% of the things in a day probably account for 80% of your unhappiness as well. And by asking yourself what those 20% of things are for both, not only figure out what you should pre-schedule in your calendar for next year, because you know you love doing those things, but also what your not to-do list is. What a not to-do list is it's like a list of items that you have figured out you hate, you absolutely despise. So why are you doing them? There's no good reason is the answer. That's why you put them on a list. And for the first month of the next year, you keep that list very close to you and you don't allow yourself to schedule in any of those things because you know you hate them. So now, of course, there will be times where you have to do them, but at least it'll be less likely that you don't realize that you're going to hate them when you put them in. Then I asked myself, what did I like and not like about my life roles for the year? What are my key goals for next year? What is my number 1 priority at work this year? And what is my number 1 priority in my personal life this year? Very similar logic to the monthly review. Less is more. So let's go through some quick examples of daily, monthly, weekly, and yearly review so you get an idea for how I actually go through and do these on the day. So for my daily reviews, I open up, looks just like this at the beginning of the day. As you can see, I already filled out what is the biggest thing I'm grateful for and what is my daily highlight. And then usually at the end of the day around 9 o'clock, because I have a timer set on my phone for that time, I start doing my nightly routine, which involves a process of filling out my journal for my daily review and also going through my calendar, my task list, my inboxes, clearing them all out and figuring out what it is that I'm going to do the next day. So then on the week, when it's time for a weekly review, I usually do them on Sundays. I will open up a workspace, which is a very hanky-danky command that you can do in Obsidian that allows you to open up a set screen for you with everything exactly aligned in a certain way already. So when I do that for a weekly review, I have my weekly review checklist over here and the weekly review template over here. Now, I don't know actually why I put this weekly review template here, because what I'm going to be doing is going to the most recent week, which is, I believe, week 41. Yes, and it will show up blank on the week that I come in. Then I'm going to put in the command for templater. This is not a video about how to use templater. There are other amazing videos on YouTube for that, but I will go to my weekly review, put it in, and then I will put down the command for filling out everything. As you can see, it worked very well. The only thing, if anyone in the comments can solve this, I would really appreciate it, because I still don't know why it's not working. I don't know how to, actually, let me change, Dan, cut this part out. I'm just changing one quick code. If anyone could figure out how to make these weekly things up here actually subtract by 1 and add by 1 with code, I would really appreciate that, because right now what I have to do is manually do it like that every time I come in. Cannot figure it out for the life of me. But after I've filled that out, I will come over to here, and usually I do this journaling process of the weekly review, like where I actually fill this part out after I go through all of these 5 things. So after I go through these 5 things, I'm not going to show how to do that right now. This is more about the journaling than the view process itself. I will close it. So I just go here to all of my days and I click Control while clicking so that it has the slide tabs option. Now in Obsidian 1.1, this is a native thing in Obsidian that you can do where you just toggle sliding tabs, and that allows you to go through all of these and open them all up. And now that I have them all opened, I can individually go through each one, and I just look through and I scan what significant things happened today with each question. I ask the question and then I go through and I look, and if I find something I'm like, oh, wow, that was so much fun, then I copy the block reference with a shortcut, and that allows me, when I go back into the Obsidian weekly review itself, I can just paste in that block reference and boom, now it's in there. And I can see when I go back through my past weekly reviews, because this is block reference, I can see what day that was referenced in. Oh, that was on the 9th. Wow, that's so cool. And that is awesome that I get to see the specific day that it happened in. So I go through and I do that for each of the questions out here, put the block references down, do it for every single day. And now I can show you a finished weekly review so you can see what it looks like. This is one right here. What was the most story-worthy moment of the week? And then I just have all these as block references. It's great. And same thing for the monthly review. If I go into here, all these are block referenced and it's fantastic. Now I don't have one for a yearly review I can show you, but that is how I go through and I do my reviews. Let's talk about some quick tips for getting started with the periodic notes plugin and journaling in general if you haven't done it before. My biggest tip is don't be a perfectionist, just write. Journaling is just for you. It doesn't have to be for anyone else. You can write anything you want. You don't have to show it to anyone. and being a perfectionist is just going to keep you from doing it in the first place. Second tip is to create conditional statements for journaling, which means attaching other habits or things that make you start the journaling process itself. So there's never a question of when to do it. So I explained earlier how I attach my nightly review to my 9 o'clock timer, which is also when I do my journaling. I go through my inboxes, task manager, calendar, and I do all the journaling for the day. My next big tip is do it for at least 30 days, and that will allow you to see the plateau of latent potential pass, which is essentially the time in habit change where most habits start to show the fruits of their labor. Journaling especially, it takes a while to see the benefits, so give it some time. And then finally, be sure to check out my video on what I learned after doing 54 weekly reviews in Rome Research. Talk about the 5 biggest lessons that I took away from doing reviews exactly like this. As always, have a fantastic rest of your day, and bye-bye.